Well, good day, eh? So for today, we're still gonna talk about the Marvel cartoon shared universe from 1966 to 1968. And for today, we're gonna talk about the first episode of
The Mighty Thor!
That's right! So, as per usual, we'll recap the episode itself. I'll give you some of my thoughts that are super duper amazing, and then we'll talk some more things about the cartoon and stuff thereafter. So, alright, let's go! So we start off on Asgard. Loki, the Prince of Evil, is imprisoned in a mighty tree and has been for centuries, but he's been able to control this tree somehow. There is a release stipulation that if someone sheds a tear for Loki, that he would be free from the tree, because why wouldn't you have a stipulation for someone known as the Prince of Evil, you know, for release? Anywho, as Heimdall is walking by the tree, Loki makes a leaf fall off of the tree, which floats down and hits Heimdall in the eye, you know, which makes his eye tear up, and well, boom, you have a tear for Loki, so he's free! The greatest jailbreak ever! So now that Loki is free, he's all like, I shall get my revenge on Thor, the person who put me here, my half-brother. So he finds out that Thor is on Earth, and so to Earth Loki goes. He has to flush out Thor on Earth because doesn't know quite where he is. So now that Loki is in disguise of a regular proper chap, he transforms some people into living negatives, like antimatter people, right? So that's gotta really suck. Dr. Donald Blake and his nurse, Jane Foster, see this magical commotion going on and are like, my god. So Donald Blake is just a secret identity for Thor. He taps his cane on the ground and transforms back into
The Mighty Thor!
Thor uses his magic hammer to break the curse on those people by spinning it around with a run-on sentence explanation, just non-stop with atoms and stuff, and BAM! People are saved! Now that Thor is flushed out, Loki's like, we must do battle, Thor! Let's go up in the air above the city and fight! Thor's like, yeah, okay, sure. So Thor spins his hammer kind of like a helicopter above him as he flies up into the air, and Loki uses the spinning hammer to hypnotize Thor. You know, which kind of really sucks, you know? He wants to get Thor's hammer away from him, you know, to keep him weak, but as soon as his hammer is away from Thor, he reverts back to Dr. Donald Blake, which breaks the spell, and he is free from Loki. Loki's kind of pissed off, so he's wreaking havoc on the city. So Thor is able to get his hammer back, and he captures Loki like lickety-split. He grabs Loki and like spins him like a rag doll above his head, eh? And just tosses him off the planet. Like, that's like the equivalent of getting slammed on the ground by the Hulk. So Loki lands on Asgard, where he has to face punishment from his father, Odin. And Odin says, you know, you've been horrible, you've been bad. You are not to leave Asgard. We're not putting you back in a tree or really giving you any kind of confinement. You're basically just under house arrest, you know, for all you've done. And well, I guess that's that. But Loki still wants to get revenge on Thor for being twice like screwed over in the last 2 attempts to get him. So Loki uses the ancient sacred smoke ritual to find out Thor's weakness. And he finds out that, yeah, he transforms into this weakling, Dr. Donald Blake. He's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. I can get my revenge on him finally. And he just leaves Asgard. Like, what? Like, he's on house arrest, basically. You can't just leave. Like, what did he do? He just went to the parole officer and said, oh yeah, man, I'm just going out to get a pack of smokes. I'll be right back. Don't worry about it, man. You know? Like, what kind of security do they have on Asgard? This is ridiculous. Anywho, he's gone. So Loki concocts a plan to separate Thor from his hammer using Jane Foster and a fake tiger, in which Thor's hammer eventually flails to the ground, and Loki puts a force field around that hammer so Thor can't get it back. So he's stuck as the weak Dr. Donald Blake. Like, damn, eh? So now Loki's free to wreak havoc upon the Earth, and so he does. He does horrible things like turning cars into ice cream and other objects into candy. Tasted candy. I guess his plan is to give everybody the dangerous
Gingivitis.
right? But luckily, Dr. Blake tricks Loki to turn off the force field by using a mannequin of Thor, and then Donald Blake grabs the hammer so he can turn back into Thor, and then, personally flies Loki up to Asgard to hopefully get, a more serious punishment and not come back to Earth. But, let's be honest, he'll be back, right? What, with the whole lackluster security they've had kind of last time he was imprisoned on Asgard? I'm sure we'll see him again. But other than that, the day is saved, everyone got a bunch of free candy, and yeah, that's pretty much the end of this fantastic tale. So this was a pretty interesting episode, and I have to admit, I actually wasn't really ready for it. As in, from what I expected it would be to what it was something completely different. I knew there was gonna be magic involved and all that, but the way it was used and how it drove the story was a bit more ridiculous than I thought it would be. Well, ridiculous in a wonderful sense though. And Thor's speech patterns were just amazing in this. We're all used to how Thor talks in the MCU, in all the movies, even in the cartoons from the 90s and stuff like that. Even in the comics that I kind of read from Thor from the 90s, he talks a certain way. But back in these early ones, man, it's such a different speech pattern. It's amazing. Sure, Thor is a god and he is royalty, so he's gonna speak more, well, I wouldn't say uppity, but it's more old school artistry, I guess, and more pronounced and more super duper proper, I guess is the way to put it. And he'll talk like this for this big spiel, and it just blew me away. It's just, I wouldn't say comical, but it's just so incredibly different, and I didn't expect it, and it's just so wonderful. So definitely nothing like the other superhero shows, thus far. So it is pretty interesting how incredibly different, but still the same that it is. So, pretty entertaining that way. It is pretty awesome to kind of see him kind of from his beginnings here, in these episodes, and how they're based on the comics, so kind of a really good way to learn the character, basically, from the very beginning. And speaking of Thor and his old comics, let's take a looky-loo at some behind-the-scenes stuff here. Okay, so just in case you knew, I'm just gonna repeat this thing kind of, really quick. This cartoon is part of Marvel's first attempt at a shared universe in television, which is mostly done throughout this cartoon called The Marvel Superheroes, which was a cartoon that featured 5 main superheroes from Marvel Comics, and we throw in a Spider-Man cartoon, for good measure, and Thor being, one of the main characters that had his own show within this show. And as I like to mention, the show is not really a cartoon, it's a comic book coming to life, right? Each panel is taken from the comic books and is redrawn as a animation cell with the most basic, and I mean basic of animation, which is pretty cool, and it makes for a really interesting kind of cartoon concept. So with that in mind, the featured episode is taken from 2 separate issues from, the Marvel Comics world. The first 2 acts of the cartoon are taken from Journey into Mystery number 85, and that came in 1962. A pretty fantastic comic because it is the first appearance of Loki, of Odin, of Heimdall, and the first time we see Marvel's version of Asgard. So pretty historic, right? The main story of the cartoon is the same as the main story from the comic, well, obviously. Same things like Loki being imprisoned in a tree. He does the old leaf falling off the tree into the eyeball trick on Heimdall. Poor guy. Loki finds Thor on Earth and hypnotizes him, and Thor eventually capturing Loki and just throwing him off the planet. Which I still think is amazing. So that's the first 2 acts of the cartoon anyway. The third act would be taken from Journey into Mystery number 88, which is also Loki's next appearance in the comic books anyway. So that kind of works out. So basically the same thing's going on. Loki is, grounded on Asgard. Loki finding Thor's secret identity, him trapping the hammer under a force field, and then getting sent back personally by Thor after. The only really big difference, between the comic and the cartoon is that in the comic, Loki had to turn himself into a snake and, it just kind of slithered past everybody to kind of escape Asgard. Whereas in the cartoon, it was just the old, see you later, suckers, kind of a deal. So that was pretty hip. Of course, the animators didn't do the whole snake, story bit because that would have meant creating more animation cells and spending more money, which I don't think they had a whole lot of money. So, just reuse the old sales from earlier, man. Oh yes, and he still did turn things into candy and ice cream in the comics, just to mess with people, because that's who he is. So Thor himself, he made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 83, and then Jane Foster made her first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 84. So that's basically the first appearances of everyone involved in this episode, so yeah, pretty cool. All bases are covered. So yeah, now that we got all that kind of done, let's get to the comparisons with this cartoon to the MCU. So Thor is, Thor. He is the god of thunder, the son of Odin, and he wields the mighty hammer Mjolnir. Although in the cartoon, Mjolnir is just referred to as the magic hammer. Kind of loses its luster, but still, potato, right? In the cartoon, Thor transforms into Dr. Donald Blake as his secret identity. Not by putting on glasses and acting mild-mannered or anything. He taps his hammer on the ground, which the hammer turns into a cane, and Thor turns into this feeble little human. So, pretty damn awesome secret identity, right? In the MCU, yeah, no. Thor is Thor. He don't change for nobody, for no way, no how. But there is a Dr. Donald Blake in the MCU. We don't actually see him. He is only mentioned by his ex-girlfriend, Jane Foster. And Thor did pose as Dr. Donald Blake, for a brief time just to kind of get released from S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. So, like a really small Easter egg, but still like a really awesome nod to the original version of the Thor character. And speaking of Jane Foster, in the cartoon, she is a nurse to Dr. Donald Blake, whereas in the MCU, she is a doctor. But not a medical doctor. She's a world-leading astrophysicist and astronomer. So yeah, bit of an upgrade, hey? But worked out pretty awesomely, I think. She and Thor were a couple in the MCU, and so far not in the cartoon, and I don't think they did in the comics either. Now that I think about it. So in the cartoon, Loki is just straight up evil and bad, right? He's even referred to as the Prince of Evil. With a name like that, just might be the antagonist. And of course, he is Thor's half-brother. In the MCU, yeah, he's much more friendly, Or at least the way he presents himself is much less evil. He's not the Prince of Evil, he is the God of Mischief. But he still has ambitions for, total power and control. He just doesn't do it so ham-fisted like in the cartoon. It's more kind of smoke and mirrors behind the scenes kind of thing, so it's kind of cooler. And when he is imprisoned, it's in a proper prison cell and not in a tree. Oh, and he's a frost giant, so spoilers. Odin, is Odin, same kind of thing. He's the head honcho, the big cheese, the main man, the ruler of Asgard, the father of Loki and Thor. And that's really all you see from him in the cartoon. You get some things fleshed out a bit more in the MCU, but mostly, yeah, man, copy and paste pretty much. Same thing with Heimdall. He made a brief appearance in the cartoon just to get hit in the eyeball with a leaf. And the MCU counterpart, really not that much different, right? The guy that looks over the Bifrost Bridge, and a dude who's really pretty important to the whole kind of operation up there. And yeah, so that's pretty much the whole long and skinny of the first Thor episode, the who's, the what's, the where's, when's. And yeah, so we'll see how things kind of get fleshed out, from here on in. But yeah, it's pretty much the, the main things you need to know about this this whole thing here. So yeah, and I guess other than that, that's that. Right on, and there you go. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you liked it as much as I did making it. Also, feel free to check out the source material that I featured in this video. And if you want to leave a comment on anything you may have liked or things I might have missed in this, feel free to do so. Or anything else, just to say hi. That's cool too. And other than that, have a great day. Thanks.